Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Janzen, and today I'm going to be talking about ag data transparency and privacy. And today what I do is I work with both farmers on various fronts with agribusiness and also with ag tech companies as a private practice attorney in Indianapolis, Indiana. Well, one of the things that I've noticed and that I want to talk to you today about is that a lot in the tech industry and in the ag tech industry are still doing things wrong when it comes to data transparency. And here's my big three things that I see over and over again. One is that a lot of companies don't seem to understand agriculture, and they don't understand that farming is different than a lot of other occupations because farming is both a passion for people, and it's also a livelihood. And it's also usually a family-oriented business. And so a lot of companies don't really understand that when they get into the ag space. Another one is that companies ignore the ag data transparent standard, and we'll talk about that today. And then finally, something I see over and over is that companies really, just because they don't know better or understand, will reuse forms from other industries thinking, oh, this is just like what another company did with healthcare data, or this is just what another company did with trucking data or something like that. So they don't appreciate farming is different and they use the wrong forms. So what I'm here today to tell you is that the contract terms matter. The terms matter for your online agreements and that you should take them seriously. Your farm is your livelihood, and so you shouldn't give away the keys to the castle to a company just because they promise data analytics or the ability to make better decisions if you turn over all the data from your farm. And ultimately, what is in the contract is going to make the difference on whether or not your information is protected or not. And why this is so important is because we're seeing more and more data being harvested from the farm all the time. So what exactly is the ag data that we're talking about? When I think about ag data, I try and put it in categories, and rather than just think of it as one big concept, try and put it in these different categories and think of it that way. Why do companies still mess this up? Why don't they take this seriously? And I guess another question would be, why do a lot of farmers not take the time to read the contracts that are put in front of them? And so I want to explore now some of the myths that are out there about agricultural data. One of them that I hear a lot is that, no one really cares about data privacy on the farm. Nobody cares about these issues. And this is something that companies often will say if they don't want to take the issue seriously. But if you look at the data, if you look at the polls of farmers who are asked or surveyed about these issues, they repeatedly show a very high level of interest from farmers in data privacy. Farm Bureau in Washington, D.C. has done numerous polls, and they almost always show about 3/4 of farmers are very concerned about where their data is going after they turn it over to one of these third parties that's out there. More recent polls continue to back this up. So even though farmers may not be talking about this often, it is something that when you poll them privately, consistently ranks up there as an issue that they're concerned with. Another myth that I hear all the time is that, well, I own my data. Farmers own the data that's generated on their farms. And I would say this is a laudable goal, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. It always depends, of course, on what is in the contract. Ownership is something that we recognize in the United States. We recognize that you can own land, you can own tangible property, things like vehicles or a pencil, paper, a computer. You can own all of that information or all of that stuff. But when it comes time to ask the question, do I own the data that's being generated by the equipment on my farm? It is a more difficult question to answer. And it's not clear in the law that just because you own a sensor, you also own the data that is being generated by that sensor. Once again, it comes back to that contract. Another myth that I hear out there is that, well, there are already existing laws out there that protect my ag data privacy. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. They think someone else is looking out for their best interest, and that isn't the case. We certainly have laws in the United States that protect information in certain areas. For example, in healthcare, we have the HIPAA statute, which protects your healthcare data, and we have it in other areas as well. But when it comes to agricultural data, we do not have laws that specifically protect your ag data privacy. And so while these myths exist, it brings me back to that one simple truth, which is that the contract terms matter. So it's very important that farmers understand the contracts they sign when it comes to ag data privacy and security. So what can you do about this? You say the contracts are important, but they're also very challenging for a lot of people to read and understand because they're written by lawyers who use a lot of legalese and fine print, and so they can be somewhat challenging to decipher. Well, one of the ways to pull apart a contract and figure out, is this something that I want to sign, is to look at whether or not it complies with the privacy and security principles for farm data and the Ag Data Transparent certification. So let me get into this in a little bit more detail here. In 2014, a number of folks in the ag industry said, we've got to get on top of this issue of ag data transparency. And so they hosted a series of roundtable discussions by companies that were in this space and said, let's put some framework around how data is collected, shared, deleted, transferred, and so on. And they came up with this document called the Privacy and Security Principles for Farm Data. So that was step one, was to come up with some guiding principles. Step two was to come up with a way to recognize companies that are adhering to these principles. And with that came the Ag Data Transparent certification. So companies that can check all these boxes, that they are following these principles, can say we are an Ag Data Transparent organization. But it's not quite that easy. You can't just say that you are. You have to go through a certification process. And I'm fortunate enough to be the lawyer that gets to review these certifications, which is why I'm talking to you about them today. But if you're a company and you say, we want to become ag data transparent, we want to be able to use this seal to demonstrate to farmers that we are adhering to these principles, how do we get it? Well, it's not that complicated of a process, but it is very informative for the farmer. The way that you get the seal is to answer 10 questions about how you collect, share, use, and delete data from farmers. The 10 questions are on the screen right now, and you can also read them online at agdatatransparent.com. But companies have to answer these questions, and then as part of the certification process, we go through and we make sure that their answers are honest, complete, and truthful. When they answer them, what they do is they answer yes or no to each of these. So there's a very simple, basic answer. They provide an explanation then for why they answered yes or no. And then finally, they provide a hyperlink that explains where this can be found in their precise contract. So if you are reading a question about, let's say, what is the company's position on data ownership, you can click on the hyperlink and it will take you directly to the contract with the company. So the Ag Data Transparent certification then posts all of these on a website, which I have on the screen now, agdatatransparent.com. And you can go to that website and, for example, you can click on the very first one there is EFC Systems. And if you click on that, you can see how EFC Systems answered the 10 questions. You can go to John Deere and you can click on its page and it will take you to their 10 question answers. And so farmers can use this as a tool to compare different products that are out there and see, how does one compare to the other? Why did this company answer yes to question 3 and this company answered no? And so this is all designed to be a helpful tool for farmers to figure out exactly which products they should use and which ones they might want to steer clear from or wait until the company's been through the certification process. Now, I said that I do the evaluations, that's correct, but I report to an organization called the Ag Data Transparency Evaluator. It is a nonprofit corporation that oversees this entire process, and it's really great because it's a very wide smattering of the industry. We have farm organizations on the board of directors, commodity groups, and then industry partners from both the startup community all the way up to your Fortune 100 companies. And so this group is responsible for making sure that the Ag Data Transparent Seal always represents what farmers believe it represents. Finally, I want to point out one thing that the Ag Data Transparent organization has done to further transparency in data contracts. You know, a lot of companies will say a simple, concise, easy to read contract cannot be done. Our lawyers say that we have to put in all these different provisions, and it needs to do this, and it needs to protect us, and so on. And that ends up creating these 20-page monsters that no one reads. What we did as an organization is we said, let's come up with a model agreement that we can give out for free to companies that say, how do we fairly and adequately address the data issues that farmers have? And so any company can go online and download this, and they can use this as a template to describe how they collect, share, store, transfer, delete data, and so on. So don't say it can't be done, because we've done it and we've made it available to the entire industry. So your takeaways from today: obviously the contract terms matter. 3 things to remember about this phrase. Number 1, existing laws are not going to protect your ag data, so don't assume that someone else is looking out for you. Secondly, read the ag data contracts that you're asked to sign. Don't just check the box that says this is okay. This is your livelihood. It takes time, but it's worth it. Read the contracts. If they don't make sense, maybe you shouldn't sign up with that platform. And finally, review the Ag Data Transparent website and figure out, is this company certified? If they are, you can look at how they answered the 10 questions, and I think that could be a shortcut to a thorough review of the contract, because you'll know exactly what their position is on these issues. So remember, read, and review. That's your task. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. If you'd like to know more about the work that I do in the ag tech space, or even in the agricultural space more generally, check me out on the web at aglaw.us, or feel free to send me an email or follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much.